You know, if you're one of those people who believes the government is constantly hiding secrets and covering things up, you'd be absolutely right. I'm one of the many people they hire to clean up their mistakes. I'm not really sure why they chose me. There's nothing special about me. Perhaps that's precisely it. I was already a loner, not someone who was going to cure cancer or invent a weapon of mass destruction, so I was easily disposable. They approached me after a shift at a fast food joint. I'm not sure I had much of a choice, but my life was so dull I was ready for any kind of change. The men who came to my door didn't even tell me what I'd be doing, just that if I wanted to help my country, I should follow them. I didn't look back once, and as strange as my life became, I still don't regret it. The next year of my life was grueling. I was put through extreme physical and mental training, learning about things I thought only existed in movies. I'm not sure what would have happened if I'd failed, but I can't imagine they would have let me return to my normal life. They never mentioned what I was training for until I graduated and received the seal of approval from the higher-ups. Then, in a small room with men in black suits, I was finally told my new job: hunting down failed experiments and other oddities the government had failed to contain. Not all jobs would be the same. Some easy, some impossible. Most missions offered the option to bring the target back dead or alive, though alive was always preferred for further experimentation. My first assignment was on the easy side. Codename, the Ice Cream Man. Like most failed experiments, he was once human, but now he just looks like a typical ice cream truck driver. He's essentially a robot, only concerned with doing his job. The special part about his truck, its music from its horns acts like a human magnet, entrancing anyone within hearing distance to approach the truck. Once you're near, you buy the ice cream. I've heard it tastes delicious, but you'd never know for sure. This ice cream causes anyone who eats it to enter a fugue state for the next 12 hours. You'd carry on your day normally, but remember nothing the next day. I'm sure you can see its value to the government. Unfortunately, the scientists testing him underestimated him. They woke up 12 hours later, wondering where their test subject had gone. For this simple assignment, they gave me enhanced noise-blocking earplugs and sent me to his last known location. He wasn't hard to find. I just followed the massive lines of vehicles. He'd serve everyone in the area, which made my job easier, since nobody would remember me. After everyone else had their ice cream, I lined up. As he tried to serve me, I reached into the truck and injected him with a tranquilizer. He might be a shell of a person, but he's not immune to good old-fashioned medication. I tied him up, hitched his truck to my vehicle, and dropped him off at the nearest government facility. I then awaited my next target. As I said, that was an easy one. My next assignment wouldn't be so simple. Codename, the Ripper. Unlike the Ice Cream Man, the Ripper was still mostly human. He hadn't lost his emotions or become a zombie. Perhaps that was the problem. Through intense experimentation, the Ripper gained the ability to create an intense, concentrated earthquake. He had already collapsed a facility he was being stored in. The main concern was his danger to others. If he used his ability in a heavily populated area, countless lives could be lost. This was one of the few cases where I was advised not to bring the target back alive.
Again, I felt this assignment was a test, a different kind. The government wanted to see if I could kill for them without hesitation. If I did, there would truly be no escape for me. That was fine, though. I had no intention of leaving. The Ripper was harder to find because he wasn't trying to attract attention. But if the government wants you, they will find you. He'd relocated to a small town, changed his name, his face, everything, trying to escape. I almost felt bad for the guy. I doubted he had volunteered to be a guinea pig. He probably just wanted to live a normal life. Once I found his town, I kept my distance. I didn't want him going nuclear on me. I confirmed he was my target by collecting DNA samples from his trash. All that was left was to take him down. I didn't want to kill him, but I didn't have many options. The scientists who created him were unsure of the extent of his powers and his ability to control them. If I brought him back alive, there was no telling if the government even had a facility capable of holding him. I did what I thought was best. One night, after he returned home, I put a bullet between the Ripper's eyes. It wasn't a good feeling, but I kept convincing myself it was necessary. I dropped his body off, and they thanked me for my services. It wouldn't get easier from here. My next target, codename Ghoul. This one was truly a monster. I'm not sure if the government was trying to create a ghoul, but I don't think they got what they wanted. Ghoul had enhanced strength and speed, with one slight problem. He eats humans. Who knows? Maybe that's exactly what the government wanted. As you can imagine, Ghoul found a way to escape. You'd think these government scientists would get better at containing experiments, but that doesn't seem to be the case. This mission might not have been so bad, but I was given strict orders. Ghoul was to be brought back alive. All my lethal weapons were stripped and replaced with tranquilizers strong enough to bring down a rhino. I requested a partner for this assignment, but was swiftly denied. Ghoul had taken up residence in a forest. This wouldn't have been so bad, except it was an extremely popular hiking trail. There had always been frequent disappearances there, many chalked up to suicides. But since Ghoul, that number had amplified significantly. The government did me a solid and got the trail shut down for the weekend, so it was just me and Ghoul. I wouldn't have to worry about anyone else getting in the way. I'd always wanted to go on a hiking trip, but this wasn't quite what I'd pictured. I set out into the forest, looking for signs of his nest. I made sure not to shower all week in preparation. If he came to me, it would make my job of dragging him back to the vehicle a lot easier. I was sure he'd get hungry eventually. After about an hour of following markings and footprints I assumed belonged to Ghoul, I started finding human bones. I was getting closer. I followed the path for a few more minutes before I heard noises. It looked like my date had arrived. I heard tree branches shaking as he drew nearer. After only moments, he was standing on a large tree right in front of me. He looked down, studying me. He wasn't that big, maybe 5'6", with an average frame, but looks can be deceiving. His skin was sickly yellow, and his hair had begun to recede, like an old man, but he was clearly much younger. His eyes were pure white, containing nothing else. After a brief stare down, he jumped. There was a good 50 feet between us, so I thought I'd have a few seconds to ready myself, but I was wrong. As if he were a video game character, he soared from the tree and landed directly on top of me. I had just enough time to pull a tranquilizer and shove it into his side, but it wasn't enough. Despite the strength of it, he seemed relatively unaffected. He shrugged it off and proceeded to take a chunk of flesh out of my shoulder. I lay helpless as he chewed on my flesh, knowing it wouldn't be long before he went back for seconds. I struggled to pull another tranquilizer, but managed to get one out right before he lunged for another bite. I jammed the second directly into his neck. I felt his teeth begin to lock down on my own, but before he bit down, he passed out. I let out the biggest sigh of relief in my life and pushed him off me. I then placed the special restraints I've been given for him, making sure the muzzle was extra tight. I wasn't sure how long the tranquilizers would last, but hopefully long enough for me to deliver this monster. Despite missing a chunk out of my shoulder, I had escaped alive. This was only one monster science had created. I could only imagine what my future held.
After Ghoul, I told the higher-ups I'd need at least a month off. Knowing what they'd put me through, they obliged. If anything, they were impressed I'd come back mostly in one piece. Those were a few of my targets. I have many more tales to tell, but that would have to wait. I just received my next assignment and had to begin preparations. If I survived, I'd be sure to post more. Hopefully I'd be back in one piece this time. Before I talked about more targets, I needed to address a few concerns from my last post. A lot of you were worried about the bite I suffered from Ghoul. As far as I know, I haven't contracted anything yet. I was told whatever they did to him shouldn't be contagious, but I made them run some tests regardless, all of which came up negative. They did give me some special pills, but I was told these were to help speed up shoulder recovery. It wouldn't surprise me if they were hiding something. I just hoped that if I did start craving human flesh, I'd still have enough mental fortitude to pull the trigger one last time. Another thing I wanted to address was who I work for. I only ever refer to my boss as the government because I have no clue what branch this is. It's possible this isn't the government at all, but I doubt it. It's far too ingrained not to be. It could be the CIA, but I'm not certain. The only questions I ask are the ones that will hopefully keep me alive longer. After my month-long break and recovery from Ghoul, I was given an easier assignment to ease me back into things. Codename Romeo. Romeo was made to be a charmer, a true Adonis. He made the statue of David look ugly in comparison. From what I could tell, he was designed to charm women, probably foreign diplomats, but he charmed anyone and everyone. That's how he charmed his way out of his holding cell. Romeo isn't really a danger to anyone except perhaps himself if he found himself at the hands of an angry spouse, but I'm sure he could get himself out of that too. Finding Romeo was easy, but the hard part would be extracting him. He was always surrounded by a crowd, almost like a cult. If there was a high-class party, Romeo would be there. He'd never return to his room with less than 10 people following him. I'd need a good plan to separate him from his entourage. I decided to attend one of his parties to get a better scope of the situation. It was crucial that I find any openings he might have. What I didn't expect was for Romeo to approach me. "Good evening, monsieur. I do not believe we have met before. I am Romeo. And you, monsieur?" he asked. Was that French? I almost threw up in my mouth. I guess I should have expected the seller. It was quite the ego after all. It was good to see his charm wasn't working on me, though. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it might have something to do with my disgust at just how perfect he is. "I'm James, and I'm kind of new here. Nice to meet you, Romeo," I managed to respond. "James? What a fabulous name. Alone at a party? Unacceptable. Come with me. My friends and I are about to return to my estate, and I will show you the finer parts of the city." Was that a sexual reference? Regardless, this was going much better than I had expected. I was making direct contact with my target. If I went alone, perhaps I could just wait until everybody fell asleep and sneak away from Romeo before anyone knew. "I don't know. We just met, and I wouldn't want to impose on you like that," I sighed, trying to play hard to get. "No, I insist. Samantha, go with my friend James here and guide him to my home. I will be there shortly. That is somebody that I must see first." Romeo replied, motioning to one of the women from his group. Samantha did indeed guide me to Romeo's home. I already knew where he lived, of course, but I had to play along. Romeo's estate was a true mansion, with aesthetics that would make somebody think they designed the home in a game. Samantha escorted me inside, and the rest of Romeo's entourage would arrive for the afternoon. I was offered some scotch that apparently had been aged over 100 years. I'm not much of a drinker, but I accepted it nonetheless. Romeo arrived almost an hour later, fashionably late to his own party. Once he arrived, he immediately approached me. "James, follow me. That is something I must show you." I didn't hesitate to follow him. This was my chance to be alone with him. I could tranquilize him and be on my way before anybody else knew. He led me to a room on the other side of the home. The room was something else, something I didn't expect. The walls were covered with pictures of men and women, each one a different persona. I even noticed a few of them from his group. "What is this?" I said, without even thinking. "These are all the people I have conquered, and you are the next. Please remove your clothing," Romeo said as he turned his back on me and began removing his own clothing. I almost felt compelled to remove my clothes. His words held so much power, but I was able to hold out. I approached him and stuck the tranquilizer into his neck. I made sure to duct tape his mouth. I had heard enough of his words for one night. Romeo was much bigger than me, so it was quite an effort dragging him out of his window and back to my vehicle, but I managed to do it before anybody got suspicious. I assumed his friends simply thought he was taking his time to conquer me. I dropped off Romeo and made sure to shower extra well that night. My experience with Romeo also made me miss my encounter with Ghoul. My next assignment would be another fun one, codename Kong. What happens when you splice human DNA with gorilla DNA? Apparently you get Kong. Personally, I would have preferred the name Caesar in reference to Planet of the Apes, but I suppose he's not a gorilla, and I don't get to pick the names anyway. Kong is essentially a smaller version of Bigfoot. And before you ask if Bigfoot exists, I don't know. I haven't been tasked with hunting him down yet. Kong would be a kill task. There was no guarantee the tranquilizers would work or for how long. Not to mention, he had killed 2 scientists when he escaped, so they weren't too worried about him coming back alive. They just wanted to dissect why he was after that man. I was given specific parameters to avoid the head if at all possible. They mostly wanted to examine the brain, which wouldn't be possible if I had splattered it all on the ground. Another problem I faced was my experience with long-range weapons. It had been part of my training, of course, and I had gone through the basics, but I was bad at it. I had been told that most of my missions would be up close and personal anyway, so it wasn't that important. It was starting to seem very important now. Similar to Ghoul, Kong had taken up residence in a forested area, but since his diet didn't consist of human meat, he had chosen a much more secluded area. I don't think Kong really wanted to hurt anyone. He could have lived his life out in these woods, never bothering anyone, but that's not what the government wanted. My superiors informed me they had already done overhead sweeps of the area and could tell me exactly where the cave he was staying in was located. Of course, they had done the easy part. I would get to do all the dirty work on the ground. I made my way over to a vantage point overlooking the cave and set up the sniper rifle they had supplied me with. All I had to do was wait. After a few hours, Kong finally made his appearance. He walked out of the cave and began to stretch his limbs the way most of us do after we wake up. I steadied the rifle, aimed the crosshairs over where I assumed his heart was, and pulled the trigger. I missed. I hadn't taken into account the wind that had picked up since I had started waiting. The bullet had strayed to the right of Kong, hitting the rock of the cave. Kong didn't move, though. Instead, he simply turned his gaze at me with eyes that were all too human. He didn't try to escape. He knew I would come. If it wasn't me, it would be someone else. Kong had accepted his fate. Now, I had killed the Ripper, of course, but that was different. I had done that while he was asleep. I didn't have to see the look in his eyes before he died. I almost wished Kong had been a monster like Ghoul. That way I wouldn't have to feel bad about putting him down. But, with a slight hesitation, I reloaded my gun, took aim, accounted for the wind, and fired once again. Bullseye. Kong went down instantly. I made my way over to confirm he was dead, and luckily he was. He wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Kong weighed far too much for me to drag back on my own, so instead I set off a flare I'd been given for this moment and waited for the air team to come and collect him. Seeing Kong's lifeless body really made me begin to question my line of work. I had never felt so disgusted in my life. But I knew there was no way out for me. I was already in far too deep. Perhaps the government had created another monster in me, and someday they'd have to put me down too. But for now, I was still doing their dirty work. Kong had really brought my mood down, so I thought I needed to lie down for a bit.
I was back with a few more assignments to share. I wasn't sure how much time I had, so I'd jump right into it. First up, codename Delilah. Delilah is, well, a doll. A ventriloquist doll, to be exact. Despite her simple looks, she's quite dangerous. Probably not in the way most of you would expect. She can't move on her own, and while she can speak, that's it. So she won't be running around your home in the middle of the night stabbing people. Instead, Delilah has an incredibly strong power of influence. One look in her eyes, and she'll have complete control over you. It's a bit ironic, really, a ventriloquist doll making humans her puppets. In my briefing, I was told Delilah is essentially the definition of sadistic, enjoying making her victims inflict as much pain as possible before eventually disposing of them. I'm not sure if demons are real, but if they are, I'm sure that's what's trapped in that doll. Delilah was believed to be staying with a family of 4. She had been taken there by a scientist who had fallen under her control. She'd only been gone for about a week, but there's no telling what she could have gotten up to during that time. The scientist who had taken her returned to her workplace a day later and had attempted to murder her co-workers, but that was quickly taken care of. I made my way to the family's home, hoping to be surprised by what I saw. Let's just say I got my wish, but not in the way I'd hoped. I knocked on the front door, and after a few minutes of no response, I turned the handle to find the door unlocked. I wish I hadn't. The moment I stepped into the home, I was hit with a putrid smell, one that I knew meant death. The walls were coated in blood. Some was dried, some was fresh and still slowly dripping. I found the family together in the living room. The mother and the 2 children were sat in a small triangle, already dead and rigid. Their stomachs had been cut open, with their entrails hanging out. They had been posed in a way to make it look as if they were eating their own organs. In the center of that triangle was the father, hanging from the ceiling. He had scratches and cuts all across him, but that was nothing compared to what had happened to his family. Just before I was about to spill my lunch all over the floor, I heard a voice from the opposite corner of the room. "Just in time. What do you think of my art? It's a little sloppy, but I'm sure it'll get better in time," the voice, Delilah, questioned. "Oh, have you come to get me already? I was having such a fun time." "Well, I'm done here anyway. I guess you can take me back now. I'll be out again soon," Delilah said. I made my way over to the voice, making sure to keep my head down. I had no intention of ending up like that family. When I got close, I closed my eyes. I managed to pick her up and flip her over, then made my way back to the vehicle. "Let me sit up front. I like to have conversations during my car rides. Plus, you can't get much action from women in this line of work, so it'll be fun for both of us," Delilah said mockingly. As much as I wanted to chuck her into the back and throw a blanket or something over her, I also didn't want her to be out of my line of sight, so I granted her wish. I carefully sat her up front, turning her head towards the window. I'd be lying if I said part of me wasn't curious about her. I wanted to know more about what makes a monster a monster. "You should just take me home with you. Tell your boss I wasn't here, and I'm sure we could have lots of fun together," Delilah said. "Yeah, I'm sure you would make great kindling for a fire," I responded. "Oh, ho, ho, you're so funny. I like you. I was thinking that I would have somebody kill you eventually, but maybe I'll keep you," she replied. "Oh, you don't just kill everyone?" I asked. "Of course not. I'd like to let the really bad ones live a bit. It's more fun that way." "What do you mean by that? Are you saying I'm a bad person?" That made me a bit angry. I almost turned to look at Delilah, but I thought better of it. Was she just trying to provoke me? "You're not quite on my level yet, but I see potential in you. You didn't even scream when you saw my work. And maybe you even enjoyed seeing it. You may think we're different, but we really aren't," Delilah retorted. She was partly right. I hadn't reacted when I saw the bodies. I'd felt a little sick, but if I had seen that a month ago, I would have probably passed out. Whether I liked it or not, I was definitely changing, and I didn't think it was for the good. "What are you?" I finally asked after a few minutes of silence. "Look into my eyes, and I'll tell you what," she replied. "Nice try. I may be stupid, but I'm not that stupid," I responded, almost bursting out of laughter. "What are you afraid of? Do you think you'd see yourself if you looked into my eyes?" She prodded. "That's enough. One more word and I'm Googling where the nearest wood chipper is," I snapped. Those were the last words I spoke on our little road trip. I dropped off Delilah and informed them about the mess at the house. They said they'd send somebody to clean it up. I was hoping they'd give me a break after what I'd seen, but I wouldn't be so lucky. As soon as I turned in Delilah, they told me they had a new assignment ready for me. That would be codename Jack. What a name, I know. This was probably the oddest assignment I'd received yet. Jack was, from what I could tell, entirely human. I had no clue why I'd been tasked with finding a human. Perhaps it was a runaway scientist, or somebody who just knew too much. But he certainly wasn't what I had gotten used to hunting. I was told Jack was incredibly dangerous. I shouldn't take any risks trying to capture him alive. In other words, They wanted him dead. This only made me more curious as to what secrets Jack must have held. Jack was constantly on the move, so it wasn't easy to find him. But my training had paid off, and I was eventually able to track him down. I watched him for a while. He didn't seem dangerous to me. Suspicious and cautious, yes, but not dangerous.
One night, he stepped out of his hotel room to go get food, so I decided to let myself in. Jack and I needed to have a talk. Jack didn't seem too surprised when he returned to his room to find me sitting on the couch. He simply held up his arms. So, they did send someone for me after all. Go ahead and do what you have to do. I won't fight it, he said. Sit down, Jack. I just want to talk, I told him. Jack raised an eyebrow. This is a curious one. You know what they say about curiosity, right? He replied. I rolled my eyes and once again motioned for Jack to sit down. Who are you, Jack, and why did they send me after you? I asked. You don't know? I'm you. At least I used to be. They tell you where to go, who to kill, who to bring back alive, and we do it, no questions asked. I couldn't handle it anymore though, so here I am, and here you are, Jack explained. This took me back for a second. I had known he had to have some connection to my agency, but I never considered he had been in the same position as me. So there really was no way out other than death. I walked across the room, pulled out my gun, and I killed Jack. I had the answers I came here for. Perhaps Delenda was right, and we weren't so different after all. I returned with Jack's body and wasn't asked to give my usual debriefing. Instead, I was just given a simple nod and told to go home and wait for my next assignment. I wondered if this was another test. If it had been, I was pretty sure I passed with flying colors. I understand if you all think less of me for the choices I made, but if it wasn't me, it would be someone else. This was a life I had chosen, and perhaps a life that was chosen for me. Regardless, I couldn't back down now. I was simply one discardable person in the whole scheme of things. Don't mistake my actions for blind loyalty, though. I knew the people I worked for weren't good people. I simply knew my place in this world. The moment I stopped being useful, I would end up like Jack. How does that saying go? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I was a cog in a giant machine. Once my cog stopped working, I'd be discarded and replaced by another. Despite the fact that I risked death every day, I had never felt more alive. I no longer had nightmares of those I'd killed. I'd stopped caring about things like that. If I became too soft, I would end up like Jack, and I had no intentions of letting that happen. After I'd disposed of Jack, I was given a week off. It had been a while since I'd had any time to myself. It was a bit strange. I never had many friends to begin with, and my work had distanced me from the few family members I had kept in touch with. This week off made me realize just how empty my life would be. Was this what they had wanted? Regardless, I was ready for my next assignment when my week was up. I got one. Codename Mimic. As her name implies, Mimic is a master of disguise. She has the ability to morph her face into the perfect replica of anybody she chooses, but she is unable to change her body. I imagine she's still a work in progress, but can you imagine what the government could do if they could create perfect body replicas of anyone they wanted? Mimic had escaped with a few other experiments, but she was the top priority. It was believed that they had all split up, but I was still warned to be on the lookout in case any of them teamed up. Due to her ability, Mimic would be incredibly difficult to locate. Because of this, several hunters like me were given her as an assignment. If our information was correct, she had not made it out of the city we lived in, but if she had, we may never find her. The only thing we would be able to identify her by was a distinct scar on her left shoulder. The government had set up roadblocks at all of the city's exits, while as hunters searched within.
The 3 hunters and myself were each given a quadrant to search. Mimic had no family, so she would either have to break into somewhere or find an abandoned location to stay. I spent several hours searching the streets of my quadrant and asking strangers if they had seen a suspicious-looking woman, as well as checking out old, decrepit homes that hadn't been lived in years. I found nothing. That was until I was approached by a slender young man, probably in his early 20s. "Are you looking for someone?" the man asked. "Yeah, it's hard to explain. I'm looking for a girl, but I'm not entirely sure what she looks like." The young man chuckled before continuing. "Well, I may be able to help you. I saw a girl run into an old abandoned building around the corner. She was acting pretty weird, constantly looking over her shoulder. Maybe she's the one you're looking for." "Thanks. I have to go check right now," I said as I pushed past the man, not giving his words a second thought. I quickly made my way to the building and let myself in. To my amazement, Mimic was actually there, but it wasn't quite what I had expected. Mimic was tied to a chair. I knew it was her because her scar was in clear view. No other hunters had contacted me to tell me that they had moved into my area and that they had found Mimic, so why was she tied up? That's when I remembered who told me I would find her here. The stranger. Before I could even turn around, I heard his voice. "It's a gift. She's quite important to them, isn't she?" It was the strange young man I'd just met, but he wasn't behind me. He was in front of me, near Mimic. How had he gotten in front of me? I'd almost sprinted over here. "Who are you?" I asked. "That's not important right now." "Aren't you going to thank me?" "Oh, wait. That's unimportant either. The real reason I'm here is to deliver a message to you." A message from who? I was truly perplexed. As I said earlier, I made contact with almost no one. "Don't look so confused, friend. It's from your girlfriend. Have you already forgotten about her?" Delilah would be so upset to hear that. The man mockingly replied. I immediately cut him off. "Delilah is not my girlfriend. Delilah is a demonic doll that I want nothing to do with unless it involves a large fire." I was almost shouting. The man laughed before responding. "She said you would say something like that. Regardless, I just want you to know that she's coming to pick you up sooner, and that she really misses you. Now, if you'll excuse me," the man turned and began to walk away. "Where do you think you're going?" I said as I pulled my tranquilizer gun and aimed at him. He didn't respond, nor did he stop walking, so I fired. My aim was dead on, but the dart passed through the man as if he wasn't there. He continued walking up to the wall and proceeded to walk through it. What the hell just happened? A man appears out of nowhere and leads me to Mimic, then tells me that Delilah is coming for me, and to top it off, there's something going on with that man, seeing as how he knew Delilah, but also the fact that objects passed directly through his body. Was he under her control? I didn't know what was going on at all, but I still had a job to do, and my target was right in front of me. I let the other hunters know that I had found the target and that I was taking her back. And that's what I did. I brought Mimic back to my bosses. I was almost expecting some sort of praise, but I knew that would be unlikely. Despite her value, I would be surprised once again when I made it back to the holding facility. The whole place was in complete lockdown, or whatever could be locked down after the building had been blown off. The facility was located outside of town, in a secluded area for obvious reasons, so I knew no innocent people had died. But I did see the corpses of many scientists and guards strewn around the facility. I know some of them had families, but these people weren't exactly angels. I managed to find one of my superiors who was able to briefly fill me in on the situation. While our forces had been thinned looking for Mimic, a group had attacked the facility. It was obvious they were looking for a particular experiment, but it was unsure exactly who they were after at this point. Around 20 to 50 experiments held in the facility had escaped. I tried asking which of the experiments had, but I was told it was confidential.
They simply told me to leave Mimic with them and to go home and wait for them to sort this all out. I would be busy very soon.
Part of me already knew at least one of the experiments who escaped. Her. The target. I thought it was a big possibility. I was already told that she was coming for me. I wasn't sure what was about to happen, but it couldn't be good. It had been a few days since the attack on the facility. I was temporarily sent home while the government sorted out the mess. With half of the building blown off, it wouldn't do much good to start hunting the experiments before we had a place to store them. We'd find them eventually anyway. I was able to sleep for about 4 hours before my phone rang. It was time to hunt down the escapees. Myself and 3 of the other hunters that had helped look for Mimic were called in. We were given a short list of the experiments that had escaped, and to my dismay, Delilah was in fact on that list. She couldn't move on her own, so it was clear that she was with another one of the experiments. Which one, though, I had no clue. I tried flipping through the pages to see if the man I had seen with Mimic was on the list, but he wasn't. We were able to find about half of the 20 escapees within the first day. Some of the experiments just stood out a little bit too much, and with nobody to help them on the outside, they were pretty much sitting ducks. There were still 11 at large, though. Delilah, of course, among them. I kept hoping that every time we found a new lead, it would be the one carrying Delilah, but unfortunately that was not the case. After doing a quick sweep of the nearby city with no new results, we were all sent home to rest. The government would go through cameras and contact us if they found anything. They were also calling in reinforcements after the attack, trying to find out who orchestrated it. There was absolutely no way I was going home with a killer doll stalking me. Instead, I made sure that I wasn't followed. I parked my car on a random street and found a small motel. It was a crappy rundown place, but that oddly made me feel safer. I slept with my lethal gun in hand and my tranquilizer gun nearby. I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep much, but it would only be worse for me if Delilah did come and I was too exhausted. The night went by with no incidents. I was called early in the morning once again. It turns out 2 experiments had been spotted together. They had stolen a car and were running around to leave the city. The people back at the facility slowed them down as much as possible with stoplights. They wanted me and one of the other hunters to meet up and follow them. They could possibly lead us to more of the escaped. I was able to quickly meet up with one of the hunters from before. He was probably in his mid-30s, so he had been doing this much longer than I had. Luckily, we were able to catch sight of the stolen vehicle just before it left town. Despite knowing that they had been slowed down, it seemed too easy. The car began taking back roads and eventually pulled into an old cabin. Despite us being the only car behind it for most of the time, it didn't show any unusual behavior, as if it suggested they knew we were following it. The other hunter pulled over a short distance from the cabin, and he began to ready himself. I pulled on my collar. This was obviously a trap. I thought that maybe I could call backup, but the other hunter stopped me. "Listen, James, I've been at it a long time, and I know this is probably a trap, but do you really think they're going to send anybody to help us? We're on our own, and you can either help me or sit out here and wait. I'm going in," he said. "Well, after you, I suppose," I replied coldly. I knew that he was probably right, though. The government didn't care much about us. They would probably have just scolded me and asked what I was waiting for. So I began to gear up as well. All death might be favorable compared to whatever Delilah wanted to do with me. The other hunter and I exited the vehicle and made our way as sneakily as possible in daylight. Once we had made it to the door, the hunter made a countdown of 3 before throwing some sort of grenade through the front window. It exploded in a gas, quickly filling the home. I couldn't help but wonder why I'd never gotten access to these grenades before. After the gas had mostly dispersed and we covered our noses with our shirts, we went inside. We instantly found one of the experiments unconscious on the floor. If I remembered correctly, her code name was Trauma. By touching someone, she could force them to see their worst nightmares. I guess since waterboarding is too inhumane, she must be the solution. The other hunter began to make his way over to her, and he began restraining her while I watched his back. He was almost done when everything went black. When I came to, I saw the other hunter was tied to a chair in front of me. He was still unconscious. Then I looked down to see I was in the same situation. I was firmly tied down to a chair. "Finally awake," a male voice to my side said. I turned to look. It was the man from before, the one who had walked through the wall. He was also sat at a chair, but he wasn't tied up.
I doubted any sort of bindings could hold him anyway. On his lap sat a doll, the doll that had pulled up just enough to cover its eyes. The man began to speak. "It's actually a bit funny. Last time we met, I gave you someone tied up in a chair, and now you yourself are tied up." "What do you want?" I replied, not in the mood for any games, not that I had much of a choice. "I told you, now that the bad ones live, and you have been quite bad recently. Killing that poor man Jack? It was a bit fast, but I'm sure you still enjoyed it," Delilah said, laughing. "I just did what I was told. He knew what he signed up for," I argued. "Yes, he did. The rest of us are not so fortunate to have our lives ruined by the government. The only difference between us is that you had a choice. The rest of the experiments and myself never had the luxury of knowing what they were getting into." "So what, you want to overthrow the government and expose them or something?" I questioned. Delilah began to laugh. "Oh, heavens no! They are far too powerful for something like that. There are too few of us to even think about challenging them. No, I simply don't care enough for something like that." "What do you want from me? I may have done terrible things, but I'm still nothing like you." "Oh, maybe not yet, but you will be soon enough," she said.
After she said those words, 2 new people entered the room. They were both wearing lab coats. The one held a syringe, and once he reached me, he plunged it into my arm, releasing the fluid. Once again, the world went black. I found myself looking at 2 bodies. One was the other hunter, the other was mine. Both had a bullet hole in their head. I was impossible. I was dead. Then how was I still seeing this? I quickly looked down at myself, fearing the worst. I wasn't wrapped in a doll. I still appeared to be human. I touched my face and the rest of my body. I still felt solid. I was still capable of picking things up. But why was my body seemingly dead on the floor? It's incredible, isn't it? It looks exactly like you, even down to the fingerprints, one of the experiment's abilities. The other one is a replica. He's quite dead, and done with your gun, by the way. This came from the voice of the ghost-like man from before. "What did you do to me?" I asked. I knew they had done something to me. The man simply shrugged. "It seems as if your body had rejected the serum that we had planned for you." Rejected? Well, at least that was one thing to be happy about, although I was still stuck in a room with one of my captors, as well as a dead body and a replica of my own dead body. "What now, then?" I asked. Even though I wasn't sure, I did get a direct answer. "Since it didn't work, Delilah has one last plan for you," he said. As he said this, the door once more opened. Delilah was brought back into the room by Trauma, this time with no hood. I was no longer tied up. I knew there was still no way for me to escape, so I stood still as Trauma approached me with Delilah in hand. Once Trauma stood directly in front of me, I crouched down and looked directly into Delilah's eyes. I wouldn't fight it. What I saw in those eyes was pure evil. I saw countless wars, murders, suicides. It seemed to be endless tragedy. I didn't lose control of myself, though. Instead, I quickly reached for the lighter that had been in my shoe ever since Delilah escaped. I flipped it almost instantly and lit Delilah's dress. She went up in a blaze. There was no stopping the fire. Trauma and the strange man desperately tried to stop it, but it was as if Delilah had been soaked in gasoline. I took a second to smile before sprinting out of the door. I saw several people on my way out of the house, but none of them seemed concerned with me. They were all trying to get to the room with Delilah. I knew the whole cabin would be engulfed soon, so I just needed to get out. Once I made it outside, I quickly ran toward the hunter's car I had been parked. It was surprisingly still there. They hadn't moved it yet. But he still had the key, so I smashed the window in and hot-wired the car as quickly as possible. I sped off. By the time I drove by, the fire in the cabin was massive. I almost hoped that all those inside would die. but they had all been under Delilah's power, and it's possible there were some good people among them. I let the thought die instead as I continued to move forward. I've been hiding out ever since that day. I know writing this only puts me in more danger, but this story needed to be put out there. It's almost guaranteed that the government will read this, and perhaps they will send someone after me. But I don't care anymore. I won't be a puppet to anyone. Not the government, and not a psychotic doll. I'm officially done hunting down the government's mistakes.